All right. Well, welcome to the Eternal Human Show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be here.
Well, thanks for coming on. First and foremost, I'm Evan Alsop. This is my podcast, and this is my first episode, so we're figuring it out as we go.
Yeah.
My guest is my beloved cousin here, Alex Chambers.
And
And
hello, everybody.
this is the first time we've been in person since we were wee lads.
Yes, and
So-
we've been calling for on and off for about a year now, and I'm been in North Carolina for 3 years now. So I'm now visiting New Hampshire, our hometown area. And I was like, Evan, I have to meet you in person.
Yeah.
Even though I feel like I've known you for years. now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just as easy as it goes.
Yeah.
And we're just in this magical home here. Your
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah.
Got a fire going. So
Yeah.
this is...
It's not green screen.
No, this is a legitimate fire in a fairy tale house in New Hampshire. I don't even have cell service. It's,
Yeah, that's when you
It's
know you're
amazing.
really in the boonies.
Yeah. So anyway, this is my first podcast. This is the beginning of the first episode. So we're just figuring it out as it goes.
Yeah.
There's an astrological bent to this program, as
Yeah.
you will.
Yeah.
Very loosely. I'm personally an aspiring astrologer, and I'm a musician. Those are my two main hobbies. And so what we're going to do to start with guests is just start with the basics of their chart and then see where the conversation evolves from there. So
That's perfect. And when you first told me that, I like that as a foundation a lot, because it really stuck out to me as the perfect amount of groundedness and the perfect amount of prep work and groundedness, and it's not completely something that is like a leaf in the wind. There's the perfect amount of structure, but not too much. It doesn't feel regimented. It's we'll start here, and then where the hell it goes, who knows?
Yeah.
Let's find out together, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I love that about this podcast. Yeah.
So I think now we just forget that this is a podcast.
Yeah.
And we just chat
Let's
away.
let's just get into it. Let's do our thing we do best together.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. So you're...
Yeah, tell me about this chart. I opened that up and I was like, damn, that looks like a Oppenheimer math equation.
Yeah, it can be complex, and mysterious, and I think of it like a riddle. And it's it has a language to it, and if you can start deciphering the archetypes and the symbols in astrology, then eventually you can read the riddle. But then it's still a riddle, and then you gotta
and then you went on to the next riddle.
and exactly,
Yeah.
and take it from there. So you're a Gemini sun.
Okay.
So most people generally at least have heard what their sun sign is. They'll see it in the daily paper or whatever, and they'll know which of the 12 is their birthday.
Okay. So the month of your birth, the date of your birth is always sun. So that exact June 9th, and my mom October 29th or whatever. It's that's the sun, their sun symbol, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so the sky from
Okay.
360 degrees divided into 12 different sections.
Okay, cool.
Gemini being one of them generally falls between around May 21st to June 21st. Is
Okay.
Gemini.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm a Gemini sun.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Do you have any concept of
Oh,
Gemini?
man. I mean, that's a good damn question.
Yeah. Have you heard anything? Do you have any? No, it's okay if you don't.
One of my closest friends, Theo, like you and I have talked about already, is deeply passionate about astrology, and my only intake of astrology is from him.
Yeah.
And he loves astrology very, very deeply, and he goes into a lot of these symbols, but not a lot of it has stuck with me, to be honest. Even though I love talking to him about it, it's a funny thing because some of the symbols kind of go over my head a little bit.
Well, ideally, I like keeping this simple for the most part.
Yeah.
I want this podcast and these discussions to be accessible to anybody. I mean, of course, if I have some astrology friends on, I could get into that.
Yeah, that's sick.
Maybe I'll talk to Theo one of these days. Seems like a cool cat.
Yeah.
So.
Shout out to Theo.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get you here on this podcast, and have you guys meet one day. That's one on my bucket list, is to have Theo meet you in person, and he would love it. He would I very feel like you guys would click really well.
Yeah.
Just personality wise and everything. That's why I'm bent on having it happen. You've heard it here first, folks. I'm going to make that happen. My friend, who none of the audience knows about.
That's not alienating the audience.
Yeah, not alienating the audience.
So we're not worried about that.
Yeah. Okay. So they're like, who the hell is this Theo guy?
So anyway, this little circle with a dot there is your sun. So it's right there in Gemini. Gemini, as far as the elements are concerned, it's an air sign.
Okay.
It's what some would say is a masculine sign. You could also just say extroverted. Some people would call it I believe, a yang versus a yin sign.
Okay.
So those are three, and it's a mutable sign.
Okay.
These are the different terms related to Gemini there. So again, for you, you're basically new to this
whole sphere,
archetype here.
All of it.
Okay. so it's interesting. The first things that come to mind for Gemini to me are in the year. It's the third sign. It's the peak of the sun. Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's the solstice, the summer solstice. A lot of the things that people associate with it are communication. Mm-hmm. So my first podcast guest makes sense. I got somebody who's good at talking, good communicator.
Thank you.
Really good with information, digging into the details. These types of things are associated with Gemini. Generally, just very cheerful, talkative.
Really? That's so funny. This is the stuff that makes me really want to dig into it more, because it just, when stuff like this, I don't know, the proof's in the pudding. There's a lot of things, you knew me before doing my thing here, and this stuff's just lining up, and it's just makes me really bask in the nature of how reality is really magnificent, because it's like what the hell? It's hard to fathom. You know what I mean? It's like a little bit of a one of those things that makes you sit down and fall on your back a little bit. Like, wow, this is something that the stars can look at and point to, and it's just weird in the best way. It's just weird how this is a thing, and how it's true, and how it works. And it's just really cool.
Essentially, at least my notion of it, it's like a blueprint from your moment of birth. These lights in the sky, their arrangement at that time is embedded in you as an individual.
As
somehow.
Within, so without.
As within, so without. Let me just make sure this is recording.
Oh, no worries. No worries.
It looks like it's ticking away.
I've done an episode of my podcast when I just didn't record, and I did a two-hour conversation, so I don't blame you for...
This is going to be an awesome conversation, whether or not this is successful technologically.
I filmed the whole episode with zero recording once, and I was like, no, even though it was a great conversation. I was like, that was a good conversation, but... I kicked myself for that one, so that's relatable. Checking that, I'm like, I checked probably 6 times after that. After that episode, after the next. Whoops.
This is
after the next podcast episode.
Okay.
But so tell me more about this chart. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me what lined up. You already knew me and my personality before you did it, so a lot of it lined up. You think with how you've experienced me?
Well, for me, Gemini is the easiest to pick out.
Okay.
To me. Maybe it's something about the sun just being having this influence. It's at its highest peak in that sign.
Oh, is it? That's fine.
For some reason, I can tell when somebody's a Gemini a lot of the time.
It's easier to pick up on. So when you first spoke to me, when we first reconnected, did you think I was a Gemini right away?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's just that energy is... it stands out to me more than any other one.
That's cool. I like that. I think that's special.
Yeah. And so I don't want to get too complicated here, but looking at the chart, looks like your sun in Gemini is conjunct Mercury right there. That's the sign for Mercury. That's the sun. So they're right on top of each other.
Now, what does Mercury typically symbolize?
Mercury is communication. mind.
Okay.
Like information. It's the messenger of the gods in Greek mythology.
Like data.
Data, all of these things, intellect.
Analytical.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So you got the sun.
Damn it!
Like,
Why
right
is
there.
this so accurate?
They're like right on top of each
part
other.
of my shadow is being too much in the mind. So it's funny how this reflects that. A big part of my blind spots are mind based and being caught up in the mind.
Well.
So but then a big part of my good things are caught up in the mind too. So it's a double-edged sword. It's like I'm actually good at organizing things with my mind, but I'm also. It's funny how you can have this. How it's coming to me right now is you can have this like. This thing of you being able to utilize your mind efficiently, and then and then it can manifest in really healthy and really neurotic ways, and it could do both. Like it's like a shadow can come. It's like that baseline grows love and light and positive experience, and then neurosis and shadow and trauma. Yeah. So it's interesting.
The mind is like the neutral,
and then what
area.
Can come from that? You can use the mind
way.
erotically, and you can use the mind beautifully.
It's like a tool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not good or bad.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's really fascinating how.
So I mean, Gemini is a very mentally capable, sign.
Yeah.
And the mind can like zoom out or zoom in. Gemini is very good with the details.
Yeah.
But one of the things, astrologically speaking, to keep it simple, are like the three major like aspects that people think about in astrology are the sun that everybody knows, but also something called the rising sign and where a person's moon was located.
Mm-hmm. Theo's talked about the rising.
Yeah.
I remember him telling me.
But what you're saying about kind of like these different ways of using the mind to either kind of like zoom in maybe on details or be able to take a larger scope.
Yeah.
It's interesting because your moon is in Sagittarius, which is right across from Gemini. It's like right on the other side of the circle.
Yeah.
And Gemini is really good at the details. Sagittarius is really great at the big picture. So it's kind of cool to be able to have your sun there and your moon's over here. So you can like zoom in. And then, like, emotionally, the moon is, like, in instinct and emotional. And
zoom out.
You can, like, zoom out.
That's interesting.
In that way.
Yeah. Sagittarius.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like macro and micro.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's funny because I really love getting very much into things and projects and passions. Like, I love zooming in, aka I like going, like, all in on something.
Yeah.
And then I also love the macro, like, relative, like
the philosophy, the larger concepts.
So that's funny.
Which okay, I'd like to get into like really your number one passion and where you're really just honing in life is being like a holistic health coach.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Healer.
Really?
As much as I'm flattered to be called a healer. I mean, or any of that, honestly, and I'm working on trying to own that title,
Yeah.
But I really love my favorite part of the job is the philosophical significance of health.
Yeah.
And I like getting in on that with my clients, is just being like, telling them that the root cause, the root cure isn't changing your diet. The root cure isn't these things. These are secondary things that are insanely powerful and very positive on our system. But we cannot and will not succeed if we don't start with any form of, and there's a lot of ways to put this, but just a visceral way, is self-love.
Yeah.
We cannot really have a lasting positive impact on our life unless we flip the script and begin with self-love and self-acceptance, and then act upon that self-love with good diet, with things. But the problem is a lot of people change their diets due to a lack of self-acceptance and self-love, and they change their life because they feel like, then they'll get to a point where they feel like they can give themselves the love they deserve.
Yeah.
And it's very conditional and it's very fragmented and it never works.
If I'm hearing what you're saying, it's essentially people often will, in regards to health, turn to like just the physical body, just like these external physical things, when really it's an internal quest
Yeah.
that has to start there.
Exactly. It's really an internal problem, and it's treated as an external one.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, and that's why we're all really sick, is where there's a lack of spiritual connection, and whatever that is, that can be so much for so many different people. There's a lot of different ways to say the same thing, but I think a really connecting way to say it, and one that does not sacrifice the truth, is just self-love. It's like,
it's to the core.
Technically you can get dogmatic about anything. You can get dogmatic about a story about an inchworm living on Mars, whatever. You can make anything into a dogma. But self-love, I think, is really a aspect of how we relate with ourselves that is a little bit less susceptible to dogmatic behavior, even though religions, that's what religions are in a lot of ways, is self-love made into a dogma. But I think just starting from that core again and remembering that different religions and different spiritual processes root is trying to achieve a state of accepting yourself exactly as you are, versus, I need to pray 5 times a day, and the 10 commandments, okay, and then God will love me.
Well, now we're getting into, like, I kind of think, like, in Christianity is like the Old Testament versus New Testament. All of a sudden the kingdom of God is within you. Before it was, here's in stone inscribed
it's outside of
the
you.
laws.
Yeah. That's a good point.
It's interesting. So how did you get started on this healing passion? Like, our grandfather was a healer.
I know, it's funny how that. Well, growing up, when my
family.
mom was, passionate about being a nurse practitioner and delivering babies and stuff, I, as a brooding teen, you're like, I'm gonna do the opposite of what my parents do. I'm gonna be my own. You know what I mean? Like, but then as I turned like 18, 19, 20 years old, I was like, man, it's pretty cool how my mom loves that thing, and I became more open-minded towards doing that if it felt like an actual calling. I never felt pressure to do really be any specific thing. Yeah. I never felt pressure to go into a certain business or something. I felt very accepted in that way, which I'm really grateful for. And then that kind of catapulted me and laid the groundwork for me to feel a little more able to step into projects and passions that were a little more outside of what some of people I knew were doing or whatever.
So, the social norms.
Yeah. So the reason why I felt like I'm really grateful to be in a position, like, with my friends were very supportive too, and my family very supportive. So I don't know if I would have acted on. I might have been too fear-based to act upon those passions if my parents did treat me differently.
You had the encouragement.
Yeah, I really did, and I'm grateful that I had that, and I'm glad that I've been able to kind of have one passion lead me to the next, whether it was the podcast or working on Andrew Yang's campaign or whatever. And one thing kind of led to the other. Even when I kind of throw like 10 things on the wall. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, 9 of them are flopping to the ground. Yeah. But there's that one that's sticking.
The one that's consistent.
Yeah, it helps me kind of reorient myself. Yeah. What's that word? Reorient myself to something that is bigger than myself. Something that's like, I did like doing this Andrew Yang chapter, but this is showing me that I really like sales, and I want to go into this. I want to go into sales, in health sales, meaning trying to help clients and no matter what it is, you really are selling yourself. And it's like, sales gets a bad rap. I took a class called Conscious Selling, and it just talks about how, the word sales has been tainted to mean always toxic.
Slick, manipulative.
Manipulative. Yeah. But if like if you're selling something, which the problem isn't in somebody selling something. The problem is how they go about that. Yeah. So if somebody goes about sales in a way that's aware of what the needs of the people are, and wanting to honestly have a dialogue towards getting them those needs,
you're simply making them aware of, here's something that is of benefit to you. I can offer that and facilitate that.
In a way that is, kind of connecting and genuine. And so that's what I've been trying to polish with my health coaching, is like just going to events and stuff and trying to let people know that they deserve health and that there are options, whether it's somebody else or me or
you have something to offer.
Yeah. I'm like, hey, I'll do this.
So where can people reach you? We're going to throw this in a few times, but what's your website for your consultation practice? And all of that?
Thank you I appreciate that. It's chamberswellness.com. You can book a consultation on there, and there's a bunch of different kind of sections of all my services, as well as kind of a spark notes of my history and my kind of what brought me into health and wellness in the first place and why I do what I do. And there's a lot of testimonials and that kind of thing on my website. And I also have a Google business account where you can leave reviews. If one of my old clients is watching, leave me a review, or a future client.
I'll have to, because we did a consultation last summer, and I've taken your dietary advice. I'm not always the most disciplined, but
that's okay.
It's totally had an impact. My morning routine and diet, I'm like, damn, feeling better.
Thank you.
So I can vouch.
Thank you for saying that. I love it. It's funny. I had an office for the first 2 months of me doing my practice, and I just and it was a 3-month grace period before doing the lease. So I decided not to do the office because a lot of people just wanted to do house calls. Anytime if I asked them, they're like, "Oh yeah, come over." And the house calls
That's the way it used to be.
I know, exactly. It's like,
shout out my grandpa's book, our grandpa's book. It's not out for publication, so sorry. We're working on that. So nobody does house calls.
Yeah,
he was a doctor back in the day, so. Yeah. Said house calls. So he's continuing the lineage there.
It's so funny how that the universe can be like.
It's kind of cool though that he was a doctor. He was also an actor and a writer.
Yeah.
I'm a songwriter. You're
health coaching. That's actually I haven't thought about that.
Aspects, coming through in different ways,
I did not make the connection and the distinction between you're doing that half of his passions and I'm doing that. And it's interesting how these are the things that make me feel like nothing is kind of random. I think there's some sort of structure to reality.
Yeah, and astrology can definitely
help with that.
Help just see that. The more, it's always a code. It's always a mystery. But this chart here for okay, as far as finding, one thing people use astrology for, and I think is one of the most inspiring things to get out of it, is trying to find your life course.
Yeah.
And, so there's something called the midheaven in astrology, which is essentially what was the highest point of the sky above you when you were born, in the time and place that you were born.
Yeah.
It refers to that area of the sky. And what's going on there can often give us an idea as far as our external social calling, career, purpose, insights, what have you. Yeah. So just looking again, I'm just seeing your chart here for the first time, but you have Taurus in the 10th house with Venus right there. So, and Saturn, so without getting too into the weeds here, Taurus is a sign of nature and dare I say health, right? It's like an earth sign, right? It's and it's the time of year, think May, it's everything is blooming and coming out, right?
April showers,
and Venus is at home in Taurus. It's the ruler. She's the goddess of beauty, and she's a very, benefic, I believe would be the term astrologically, planet. But she's right next to Saturn there, which is about discipline and work and structure.
Yeah.
So you got both this going on right there. You can put the pieces together. I'm not going to tell you, but it's very fitting. So it's cool to see.
It's really surreal, man. It's fascinating, hearing you talk about this, because it's just it's like somebody it's like in The Alchemist, in that scene where the old king sits next to the shepherd and says, lists a bunch of things he's never told anybody.
Yeah.
It's like a moment of like, whoa. Yeah. And I'm grateful for this reading as well, because I'm going to send this screenshot to Theo later.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's fascinating how philosophical this leads us as well, because I feel like this is another way to view the relationship with the self, and how we relate with ourselves, and in that turn, how we relate with others. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a window into so much.
Yeah. I think it's just it's fascinating how much we can gather if we just have an open mind, towards these things, and if we can detach as well, because I think that's a big part of being open-minded, is being able to let go of something that we feel isn't serving us anymore, and be like, oh, I'm going to let that go, and leave room for something that I feel will actually nourish my soul. Yeah. Because it's funny how it does feel like there's a capacity in there. There's like, oh, I can only think about and take on, and so much, because that's like taking on trauma. It's like, we need like spiritual work if we want to be quote unquote enlightened or work towards the awakening process.
Well, know thyself.
We need to pull the weeds, AKA pull the trauma out, one weed at a time, because if we don't, we will get basically our judgment will be so clouded that we won't be able to self-analyze properly.
That's one thing I really stands out to me about astrology, is that with spirituality, it can sometimes be easy for people to do what's called spiritual bypassing. Where they go straight from, I have a lot of problems as an individual, I'm going to transcend my ego, I'm going to transcend myself, forget all of that, and just become the spiritual,
without
non-identified being. Where it's like,
without dualistically facing what had happened to that person.
Well, you are a unique person, like in a chart. And again, whatever people think, I always like to say about astrology and whether this is an actual phenomenon or not. I mean, from personal experience, the more I look into it, the more I observe in the most objective way I can, the more I see like the patterns confirm, confirmation bias, what have you.
I know what you mean.
It comes out. And to me, like the archetypes here are just ancient archetypes that allow you to reflect on yourself as a unique individual. And by doing so, you get into those weeds. You get into those, okay, what are the things that make me me? What are the issues that I need to confront in order to grow? And the more you grow, eventually you can become more connected with the outer world and to the absolute.
And I think that it's funny because it's a paradox, because we're always one with God, if we're speaking technically, but then when it comes to our ability to feel that connection, the weeds are the things in the way, when we are able to kind of take one, and when we do all at once, too much at once, that's the thing. That one side of the coin is a spiritual bypassing, which is
just wanting to dissolve into the infinite to escape your problems in daily life.
It's kind of like a weaponization of truth.
Interesting.
It's like, oh, I'm going to use this to justify my, like a good example I'd say would be like somebody who feels justified in doing anything. Because this is a freaking fascinating part, man, is in my studies and experience, and again, I'm open to differing perspectives, but the unconditional love of God is so vast that we can say anything, and that love will never budge. But the weaponizing of that is, that means I can, go steal a bunch of, whatever. I can go gunpoint.
Sure, hey, no rules. It's unconditional.
It's weird because it's true. It's true. That is true. It's like God loves you, but then
there's something called karma.
But then karma.
That's a concept.
That's exactly. And that's the kind of what has been the kind of dualistic mechanism that has been created by God is this, get
free will.
You get what you put in.
Yeah.
And if you put in fear and manipulation and theft and all this stuff, it's like you're gonna get that. You're gonna get that back to you. You're gonna receive that in your life. So
yeah,
it's interesting. It's like we have a lot to contend with here in duality.
Yes,
and I think
I love how our conversations go straight
oh,
to the
yeah,
absolute
no, I can't.
duality, free will. Here we are. Let's go.
I feel like one of our phone calls.
Yeah,
and it's fascinating because I think that unconditional love keeps us from making quote unquote mistakes, what we view as mistakes. Because when we try to ignore our trauma, like you were saying, if you spiritually bypass and we try to ignore what we know we need to face, it feeds the dragon, and the dragon gets stronger, taller, bigger and bigger, and then it's even harder to face, and then it's a vicious cycle. Until it kills us, until we suffer for years or decades. And then it kills us. But that's why it's harder to like change the older you are, because you become
stuck in your ways, in your patterns.
It's harder to break chains the longer they've been there.
Mm-hmm.
But I never say that it's impossible by any means, because it's not.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, there's something called like myelin in the brain that I've heard people talk about.
That's interesting, yeah.
Where it's almost like these lines get put down.
Yeah.
These patterns, these wires
embedded in.
neurally connect or what have you.
Yeah.
And the more you do something, the more they get
embedded.
Yeah. But the same goes for like when you're trying to do something different than you're used to, like that feeling of like learning, not knowing what you're doing is like resistance, but that's like the sensation of making new patterns.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what the mind hates.
Yeah.
Is anything it's not familiar with.
So it's like not an easy thing.
We get addicted to what we're used to. Whether that thing is good for us or bad for us, the mind doesn't care at all. The mind will be like, oh, well, I'm just identified with my familiarity, whether it's maybe drug use or a spouse, or maybe somebody's dating somebody they feel like they shouldn't be dating. Yeah. And then they have the still small voice say, oh, no, like they're not the right person for that individual, but they're familiar with that person and they find comfort in that person. So then they date them for 17 years and then it's blows up in their face because they're ignoring a truth. They're ignoring the trauma. Comfort zones are deadly
for growth. Right, and that's ultimate satisfaction, fulfillment,
and that points me to balance too. I think that balance
and it comes to like what is the purpose of life? We're asking the big questions. If we're looking at this map, this chart, astrologically, or what have you, like what can we use this for? Like what are we trying to accomplish as human beings, these light beings, right? Literally beings of light. And it's like what are we as entities?
It's a good question.
The more and more I kind of zone in on that, it's as if we're like, you're talking about the alchemists, like we're alchemists. We're taking like this base matter, these traumas, these lower, not to say they're bad or good. These, lower energies. And through often struggle and, trying experiences and overcoming things, we're like transmuting that into a higher vibration, a higher frequency.
An ability, we're transmuting our rock bottoms and using them as opportunities to connect with God. I think that's something that Eckhart Tolle speaks on in the beginning of Power Now, is his first awakening that lasted like 3 years. He was just sitting on park benches, like blissed out.
That's it.
And though that he didn't achieve that through sitting in a Buddhist meditation center for 50 years or something.
It's just,
he was in such a deep state of suffering that he was suicidal, and he just hated himself and reality on such a fundamentally deep level that his ego basically collapsed and shattered. And he woke up that morning with such a deep feeling of love and gratitude towards everything around him. And I think it's interesting how deep suffering can catapult us into spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
I think that's a great topic.
And, I think that's hopefully can be a helpful message to people who are experiencing hardship and being brought to the brink of what they feel like they can tolerate in life.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's kind of an honor sometimes, the hardships we get.
It is.
Because it's like, this is what you can take. Like the stronger you are, the more you're going to be given to deal with and transmute, because you can handle it.
Exactly.
But it's going to be right up to like what you can handle.
It's fun. It's funny that I've really come to find that the bigger the problem, the larger the opportunity to practice. To practice a lot of different things. To practice taking responsibility. To practice accepting the self. To practice letting go. To practice. There's so many. Like, we act upon the world in this way that is so black and white. Like, if you make a bunch of money, you get a raise, that's good. And if you get fired or somebody punches you in the face, that's bad. But it's like,
so labels.
There's this really like old story, and I don't know if it's Buddhist or something, but it was, I don't know, I forget where I heard it, but it was a story of this guy who, oh man, I'm going to be paraphrasing here, but it was like this person living in a village, and his son got, like, something good happened to him, and there was like this sage who they were going to the town sage and being like, "Oh, sage, isn't this good?" And the sage was like, "Maybe." And then the same son broke his leg, and he's like, "Oh, isn't this bad?" And he was like, "Maybe." And then this war recruiter came to his son's house, knocked on the door, and he's like, "Hey, you need to go to war. We're going to war." He's like, "Oh, we can't. He broke his leg." And they're like, "Oh, okay. Well, you can stay
Context.
behind." So it's like funny. I'm paraphrasing it and botching it, but it's this thing. It just points to relativity.
Yeah,
it's like, he broke his leg. It's bad in a void, but then it's good because it kept him from dying in war.
We don't have the perspective as these limited beings to see the big picture.
Yeah,
that's where faith is just a prerequisite to overcome. Hardship.
Yeah, faith is fascinating. Because like faith is like a belief in the self that we can, it's like hope and faith.
And a belief of something greater than the small self, like a connected self, which kind of, it's a bit of maybe a cliche, but cliche that is true is just like a beautiful thing. So
exactly.
the whole idea of the ocean and the waves, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like we are individuals, these little waves on the surface, but we're all made of ocean. Right.
And I love that because it just points to like non-duality, and it points to the kind of like, I forget if this is actually a quote from Jesus, but I remember hearing in, maybe it was like a translation of something, but there's a kind of a section where he's lecturing to a lot of people in like one of the towns, and he's getting very passionate, and he's like flailing, or he's just really excited about and he says something along the lines of, "Oh, you're all gods." He's like, "Don't you realize you're all gods? You're the son of God." He's saying stuff like that. And how I feel about that is, we look at God as this ultimate creator, but we don't look at ourselves in the same way, because we're feared into thinking that is arrogant to say, "Oh, we're one with God, we're connected to God."
Right. And
I think that's a very kind of one way, or a kind of a 2D way of looking at this, because first off, it's assuming that somebody is, the people who aren't connected to something higher than themselves or their personal spirituality are the people that are the most egotistical. I think the people that are really,
they think that's all there is.
That they're caught up in their trauma, and we've all been there, but then the people who, how I mean that, thinking that we're one with God, it isn't this. God insinuates heavily a disidentity, which to me brings to the table a selflessness to feeling connected to God, because it's literally saying that, your enemy is you. You know, it's like, that's why Jesus said, love your enemy, you know, love these people that your little ego doesn't want to love.
Yeah.
Because that kind of is breadcrumbs to leading that you're
into
non-dual. I didn't really explain that super well.
No, you did. As an astrologer and having that lens, it kind of brings me like all these different planets represent these different human archetypes that are universal.
Yeah.
Mars is like our warrior spirit, our energy. The sun is like the self, Venus, the heart, Mercury, the intellects and communication. Everybody has all of these parts.
Exactly.
Where it's like God through an infinite amount of prisms, like kind of reflecting in different ways, but we all have the same parts, expressing in different ways.
Yeah.
So literally, we are each other.
Yeah.
Just kind of.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was. Yeah, yeah,
right?
Disguised. Exactly. Yeah. And I think that, that's a really great tool to build a sense of deep compassion towards others, because I think that sets us up to put ourselves in other people's shoes more than we would prior.
Any type of judgment, like.
Yeah.
I was reading the book I'm reading right now, Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
Great book. He was saying in the chapter I was reading last night, like any type of judgment of another person implies vanity in the judger.
Yeah. Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, it's hard. You can't judge somebody if you're like, well, that's me.
Yes, exactly. You know? Yeah. Because when we judge somebody in a way that is, we're judging ourselves.
Yeah.
Because when we...
And usually it's from a place of superiority when it comes from like this
with
critical...
those kinds of judgments.
This critical, otherly place.
Yeah, like screw that guy for being this. Yeah.
And normally it's like, oh, I could never.
Yeah.
But really that's... maybe you're just not recognizing that in yourself.
Yes. Okay. That's what I was trying. Yes. So it's.
Then you're going to be compassionate when you see it in somebody else.
It's part of ourselves that we either reject
or haven't.
It's part of our.
I'm not a pro with setting these up. That's
actually
a faulty microphone stand. I gave you the faulty one.
Yeah, it's like it's either something that we see in another person that we reject. We've rejected in ourselves, so it flares that up in us. So there's so many things that can lead to unnecessary judgment, whether it's like a response to something that they're saying is challenging our identity or beliefs or whatever it may be. So I think that's an interesting topic, is just being able to see and analyze how we judge others as a way to look at where we don't have healing yet.
Yeah, and like to the extent that you can't recognize yourself in another person, is the extent that you have not fully understood yourself.
Yeah,
really.
I think that's true. I think that's true. I think that's just such a bitch to practice. It's like that's such
it.
Yeah,
which is
so
like,
difficult.
what is the
this purpose?
Stuff is so difficult. What is the purpose here?
Yeah,
big picture. Like,
it's
like it's not comfort. It's not comfort zones that we're after, right? It's growth. It's growth.
Yeah, it's not the elimination of survival. That's the trap, right?
Yeah.
It's like, avoid survival or avoid suffering.
I mean,
and be obsessed with survival.
I mean, that's kind of not to say. I mean, we got to survive, right? We live in the material world.
I'm sorry, I messed up there. I said survive when I meant suffering. So the elimination of suffering. Sorry, I think is what brings paradoxically deep suffering. Because when we're addicted to avoiding suffering and kind of, avoiding every chance, like being in a state of comfort, like you were saying, we really...
You put on your armor.
It's hard to explain. We put on our armor and we suffocate.
Yeah, we stagnate.
Yeah, we stagnate. It's funny, like when I'm...
it's kind of like sink or swim.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because when I like go on a run or I'm feeling really... like doing a lot of things, getting a lot of things done, doing the dishes feels like not a big deal. But if I have a day of lying around the house or something, doing the dishes feels like climbing Mount Everest. I'm just like, okay, it's like, and it's like that's something that is, comes up every once in a while, is like, I'll have a day where I'm just relaxing, but it's like that's the most visceral example in my opinion, because it's like when I'm not used to acting upon the world pushing myself in a certain way.
Yeah.
It makes everyday tasks feel more difficult. And then and then I'm more susceptible to stagnating myself.
Yeah.
Due to lack of doing those things. And that comes up every once in a
your
while.
Tolerance.
Yeah,
lowers.
tolerance, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And asking that question that you asked earlier, like, what is the meaning of existence in life? You know, how I feel about that is I feel like life is basically the ultimate sandbox video game. Ooh. It's like you do whatever the hell you want to do. You know, there's some structure, but it's the ultimate sandbox game. It's like SimCity.
Yeah.
Or like so.
Are you a simulation theory?
No,
adherent?
no. Yeah. I don't dabble in that. I haven't really looked into that.
I don't know how productive it is.
Yeah, productive. Yeah, I think
there's elements of truth.
Yeah, but I feel like that.
Didn't mean to derail your.
What'd you say?
Your thought. I didn't.
Oh yeah, no worries. No.
Pattern there.
Yeah, like I feel like life is kind of like the ultimate sandbox game. Like it's just there's so much to do, and we have so much creativity that we can express.
Yeah.
But and I think that meaning is very relative.
Yeah, is there a purpose involved there?
No, there isn't. I think that's what makes it special. Is we get to create our own purpose. I think that's what the purpose is. Kind of like a meta purpose. Is like wild. We get to play the game.
Yeah.
You know, we get to be, we can play the SimCity life of Alex or life of Evan for 100 years, 80 years.
And that game could be a quest.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like not to undermine the game, right? Yeah. So if something's fiction, it doesn't undermine it in this context, in my opinion. If something is technically an illusion, you know, that's what spiritual teachers call life and attachment illusions, you know, because it's a game. You know, we're here, but people will be like, oh, that person's crazy, because most people, including myself, most of the time, take this game so seriously. We were talking about how taking life too seriously.
Yeah.
That they take that on as a attack on themselves. Like, oh, you think my divorce is a game?
Yeah.
You think my dad passing away is a game, or so it's like it's a hard pill to swallow, because this reality is extraordinarily convincing.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's like it's a
high def video game of some kind.
It's high def as hell. You know, it's like, but and it makes somebody, you know, but I feel like that. I feel like that's what makes it so special. Is it's really intricate.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, we only have dualistic terms to communicate in, but speaking of non-duality and this non-dualistic view of the world, where everything is one and ultimately we're, you know, inconsequential on a divine level, perhaps, that we can't really mentally comprehend, perhaps.
Yeah.
Then there's this other side, that going back to the ocean and then the wave. Yeah. The wave, these little minuscule little bumps on the top.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's important to not dismiss the importance of the waves. Yeah. Because then when you do that, you dismiss this idea of purpose.
Yeah.
Now, is there purpose on this larger scale other than God's playfulness or what have you?
Exactly.
I don't know if I'm one to say. I mean, us speaking together, we are two waves.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly. So we can't demonize just if somebody comes to the conclusion that purpose is relative truth.
Yeah, because then why should you know, there's no purpose. We're just here to mess around.
Yeah. No.
From my experience, purpose I can only speak. It's like
it makes it more special.
Yeah,
we get to create our purpose. That's a God inside of us, because God created us, and we are one with that.
And we have this blueprint, astrologically speaking.
Yeah, to point to.
It seems that we're born with, which is a mystery, an endless mystery to me.
Yeah. But it is a mystery. God is such a mysterious concept, and. Yeah, a lot of things I just don't know, but that's what makes me really fascinated.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I don't know what the hell's going on here. You know, but like when it comes to reality.
Yeah.
But it's pretty cool.
Can I throw a song lyric and an unreleased song that I have that I'm excited about.
Cool.
It's unrecorded so far, but there is magic in the silence of all the things we do not know.
Yes, that's exactly it. There's magic in the silence of all the things we do not know. And I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think that's deeply true. I don't even want to add to that because I just want to marinate in that sentence because that got the job done. That one sentence. I just want to feel into that because, and I feel like.
And I think silence is like, even in this podcast, like letting
it sink in.
Letting those gaps of even our communication. Like,
yeah.
That's the truth, right?
It is. You know? It is. That kind of reminds me of quantum mechanics or
all the space
between. It's like this is way more space than not space.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. This is like. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, shall we dive back into the chart here?
Please.
So again, like astrologically speaking, and again, like I just want to reiterate, like my main aim, if I have an aim with this podcast other than just learning and communicating and connecting with people.
Yeah.
I mean, that is essentially it. But it's also with each guest, like each individual human is just a fascinating, like an equally just fascinating expression of the divine, if you will.
It's true, yeah.
Right? And I just want to explore that. It's like I'm fascinated by people.
And I love how you follow that still small voice, especially people in our age range. I feel like there's a lot of just following what they feel like they should be doing. Excuse me, I'm pausing because I'm burping here. Following what they feel like they should be doing. And I think that you're really inspirational in the way that you're pursuing the things that you're deeply passionate about. And that's why one of the reasons why I feel like I clicked with you.
Well, you too, bro. I mean, it's like I think we're both on that path.
I feel that way as well. I do. Thank you.
Yeah, we're not going with that flow.
Collective pressure to 9 to 5 or whatever.
And that's where this individuation process is part of. And I do, that is part of the wave, not the ocean.
Yeah.
And I think as far as the non-dualistic conversation is concerned, I feel, and this is where I'm at philosophically now, like it's important to underline that so that if I were to have like a gripe with the non-dualistic mindset,
absolutely,
is I can just see it so easily leading to passivity in life.
Yeah, agreed.
Where I think, I was on a hike. I did a lot of hiking last summer just by myself, and it kind of, was able to mull some of these concepts over. And just this idea that the more you discover your own uniqueness, the more like you figure out what makes you separate in many ways, and like an individual expression, the more you get into that and refine that in your like intended expression, like astrologically, like fulfilling this blueprint that we have.
Yeah.
The more you get into that, the more you realize how you are one with everything else. That you are actually, paradoxically, the more of an individual you become, the more you fulfill your actual place in this giant puzzle that you're a piece in, and just merge into it.
Yeah.
It's like there's this balance
it's
to
like
be had
it's like
always.
The push and pull.
Yeah.
Inward breath and outward breath, individual, collective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And astrology is just as far as that individuation process, which I think is a term from Carl Jung, who was interested in astrology, from my understanding.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's just like a very useful guide for me that I found. To facilitate
Jung or astrology?
Yeah,
astrology.
Well, both.
Yeah, Jung and astrology, yeah.
So as far as like the three like main astrological kind of tenets, that to keep it simple, I don't want to like overwhelm any potential listener who's not familiar with astrology. We got like the sun, the moon, and the rising sign.
Yeah.
So like we've briefly discussed your sun, briefly discussed your moon and how they kind of go together. your rising sign is kind of like your physical person, who you like first impressions, and often it's like where the sun was rising when you were born. So it's like who you're becoming.
Yeah.
So you're a Leo rising.
Yeah.
So like a Leo rising is a very powerful rising sign. To me, it's literally the sign of the sun.
Wow. Okay.
So, this is the sign of the lion, the performer,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's cool. How do you respond to this? What do you think about
Yeah.
in yourself? I mean, you had a podcast before I did. You inspired me. You put yourself out there, and I was like,
you.
this is something that I've been taking me a long time to even undertake.
Yeah. Thank you. I do like being in a context of I do like being in front of people, and I really like one-on-ones like this though.
Me too.
I really like a lot of one-on-one or three-person or depending on how I'm feeling, and I feel like that's kind of linked in.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's making me think like Gemini,
Sure.
your sun is the sign of the twin. So it's the two.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like this-
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Yeah, would do like one, like a two-person.
It's like this two-person and against communication between like two people.
Yeah, good at kind of being in a 1v1
Yeah.
communication.
Yeah, and then Leo is like the performer there. So,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And Leo and Gemini are in kind of harmony.
No wonder
with
I
each
kind of
other.
like sales. I one-on-one. I try to want to do sales in a way that's constructive and honest and and authentic.
I don't think
Yeah.
there's a better sign. And I don't want to speak too broadly about any sign in
Sure.
astrology because it's so much more about one sign or your sun or anything. But like the qualities of Gemini, like that's where it's at with sales.
Really, I agree because it's extroversion. It's penetrating the world. It's going out and acting upon the world a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And communicating it and that enthuusm that's
funny.
there.
Man, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's so like.
There he goes.
Sorry.
No, that's on me.
I'm so fidgety. I'm just like.
No, I think that's like a stripped bolt. Or whatever. Let's get a new one.
What
Yeah.
What's one of the things about your chart that is so like?
Well, thank you. I should have like another one of my intentions for this is I'm not like necessarily trying to interview people, although I feel like so far maybe I think we were having a great conversation.
Absolutely.
But like this conversation, like I'm not. I don't need to just interview you. So thank you for asking me.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, no worries. I was curious because you're so like on top of these kind of astrological ideas and analysis, and I'm curious to find your opinions on how accurate or not accurate your chart is.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you.
Yeah.
So you're like, what's my chart say?
It's hard to not have blind spots to have that objectivity, even looking at my own chart.
True. Theo talks about that.
Yeah. So, but
do you like your chart?
I accept it.
Cool.
The best that I am able to. Yeah. Right.
It's so fascinating. It's funny. Like if I knew more,
it's so mysterious.
If I knew more about like charting in general. Hi.
Hey.
We're filming, so do you?
Oh no, it's okay. This is
sure?
a casual.
Oh, Grandpa's book. Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
It's all good. Sorry. And there. Making a cameo.
Sorry about that.
All good. So yeah, my chart. Well, one of like my most, I don't know, things that I am fascinated by speaking astrologically is in analyzing people, myself included, and especially in conversation, is Mercury.
Okay.
Which is communication, mind. So we have different Mercuries.
Okay.
And like one of my secret reasons is like, or no, I don't want to say that sounds manipulative. Is like for having like you, like Geminis are great talkers. Like they are. Like I think my second guest is also my friend Ari, my producer for my album I'm working on right now. Also Gemini.
You're the first 5
like,
people.
I don't have to worry about like filling the space. Like I can just
exactly.
Because like I'm kind of opposite that way.
Funny.
I have my Mercury. So yours is conjunct Sun. You're very mercurial.
Gotcha.
In Gemini. So that's great. That's a very Gemini. Mercury rules Gemini.
Okay.
That's great. Mine is in Capricorn.
Yeah.
Capricorn is an earth sign. It's very slow and like methodical. So I think my general communication style is one that is pretty thorough, but not fast. Like I need to like kind of ponder things before I say
and it's
something.
It's in how you talk too. It's good. You're very like, you just flow with the conversation really consistently, and I appreciate that. It's easy to converse with. It's easy to like connect with,
and there's always different dynamics with different people.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
I think
and
it's
adjusting to that.
Yeah,
adjusting to those differences.
Yeah, I love that. It's really unique. It's one of the unique.
But yeah, I mean, we could talk about. I mean, we have some cool things between our charts.
Yeah, I want to
like
know about
I think that explain how we've clicked. You know.
Yeah. Like
besides just being related and having some of that going on.
Yeah, blood related. Yeah, I agree.
Which definitely, like, as an only child and not having siblings, you know, not being around anybody near my age that frequently who I'm like related to, like it really stands out in a cool way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
that.
Because that's so fun. Another thing with Theo. Theo's an only child. So
oh wow.
Sorry, I'll stop mentioning these things. I'm just like, you remind me of Theo a lot.
Star of the show. It's not present. Yeah, but you're invited on anytime, Theo. So we look forward to that conversation.
Okay, it's official, Theo. Now you have to.
Oh
man.
But yeah, so for starters, my rising sign is Sagittarius. Okay. So that's where your moon is. Actually, your moon is conjunct my rising degree.
What is
so
conjunct?
That means in the sky.
Yeah.
So the sky is made up of 360 degrees in a circle.
So does that mean they're opposite ends? Is that what conjunct means?
Conjunct means they're actually in the same exact spot. Oh. They're like right on the same degree.
Okay.
So yeah, your moon here is at 11 degrees Sagittarius, and my rising sign, where the sun was rising on the eastern horizon, that's the rising sign, is 8 degrees Sagittarius.
Okay.
Anything within 8 degrees is generally considered a conjunction.
Okay.
So when I see a conjunction in a chart where two people's charts have a planet or something in the same spot, that's like a real connecting point, like a very close one. So we have that.
That makes sense. See, all this stuff is lining up.
Yeah.
It's really funny how it's like, yes, that makes sense. Synchronicity there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I could go on. And again, I guess one of my things here is like, you know, I've studied astrology for a number of years and I can get kind of nerdy about it. And so I don't want to like alienate.
I love getting nerdy
audience.
About stuff.
I want to like convey things that I know. I also want to welcome the audience who might know things that I don't to correct or add anything if they're, you know, if we have comments available, depending on how I put this thing out there,
no
you know,
worries. Yeah.
that is welcome. I'm definitely just as interested in learning. But so also Gemini, I haven't even discussed houses. You have the 12 signs, and then we also have the 12 houses, which go around, and each house means and represents a different area of life.
I recognize the house. Theo talks about the house.
Yeah. So, for example, like there's a house for kind of resources and finances. There's a house for marriage. There's a house for friends. Like these are different sections of your chart.
Cool.
Gemini for me is my house of partnership, marriage. So I like any friends, that type of thing. Like we're right across from each other.
Yeah.
You know, you're like, it's a cool sign of partnership.
Okay, yeah.
You know?
I like that. So your Gemini is in the partnership house?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so...
Yeah, seventh house is in Gemini for me.
So like connecting to others. You're highly able to connect with others. That's what that says, right? Because Gemini is kind of a heightened...
See? Like now we're just exploring the mystery of this riddle together. It's like that's something like I wouldn't have necessarily thought of myself, but I think that's a valid interpretation there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now look at me. Now I'm
Geminis are quickly learning. Fast learners. So.
I'm lining up with my map every day.
Yeah.
What are the significance of the color differentiations there?
These lines?
Yeah.
So these, I'll say there are like 4 main things that go into reading an astrology chart.
Cool.
So you have your planets and what each of those represent.
Okay.
You have one of the 12 zodiac signs, which are the 12 sections of the sky, which are kind of like the filters that the planets go through.
That's what the animals are, right? The ox and the...
Yeah, ox, that's like the bull is
What is
Taurus.
Gemini's animal?
Well, that's the twin, so it's kind of a human animal, and it stands like a brother and sister.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. Aquarius is also a human, but most of them are kind of animal related.
Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah.
But
I know it from my Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, the Chinese system, year of whatever animal.
Yeah. Just seeing that line up.
Yeah. So anyway, you got the planets, got the signs, then you have the houses, the area of life, which they represent, where they express.
Yeah.
And finally, you have these colored lines, which are the angles. So they're the angles between the different objects in the sky.
Okay.
So like sun,
angle.
yeah, like your sun and moon are across from each other, so they're kind of in opposition. So that's like a line right across.
Oh, so how they relate to each other.
Yeah, so these different angles mean different things.
Are these symbols like ancient symbols? Like that and the red and the green and the...
Yeah, I mean the zodiac signs go back
how old
along.
Are those? Like, is it thousands? Or is it like 2,000?
I mean, some of these, depending on how you want to go, like for example, the sign of Pisces is like, if you look at like the Jesus fish or something.
Oh yeah.
You know, like the Vesica of Pisces.
Is that one of these? The Jesus fish symbol?
Yeah, a lot of the sign of Pisces is related to that or associated with that.
So these are
then the
ancient...
bull with Taurus, like anything with like horns. Are very ancient.
Ancient archetypes.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in symbology, but
this is so cool though.
Yeah, it's endlessly fascinating to me.
And then what's down here? The bottom stairway type looking
these
thing.
are like charts. This is a chart that basically shows you the relationships between the planets here.
Okay, cool.
So like you'll see like the sun and the moon, and then if you follow that to the moon, it'll just have a little oppositional symbol, so it'll be like, oh, that's an opposition angle. Okay. And the main thing about the angles, without getting too like dry or long-winded,
no worries,
into it.
No, my sleep was poor last night, so sorry if I'm about these.
Mine was too.
Yeah.
Like but
yeah,
I was in the studio late.
Oh yeah, no worries. Doing what you need to do.
But it was worth it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it was worth it. But yeah, to keep it short on the angles it's kind of like you have a circle. I think of it like a wagon wheel, essentially.
Okay. Oh yeah.
And like when like a wheel goes 180 degrees, like it kind of has like a bit of a herky-jerky thing. Right? If it goes like a third of the way, it's kind of a smooth
sailing
way around. And just thinking about angles in a geometric way like that, you can kind of
easy
think
way to
about
imagine that. Yeah.
But again, I'm figuring that out as I observe.
Astrology is fun. It's like there's too much, Evan. There's too much to be passionate about. It's like I want to put a bunch of time into learning about astrology.
Yeah, and there's medical astrology is a whole different realm.
Oh really?
I like the personality stuff really, and the psychological stuff, but you can go a lot of different ways with it.
I feel like there's so many things that to be dove into, man. It's just like fascinating talking to people who have passions like this that make me want to dive into something more. It's like, but we have to discriminate. It's like, or we're never going to dive into anything. Yeah. We have to options. We have to love one or two things, maybe three, like dive in really hard if we're doing it all at once. Yeah. And it's like, it's difficult to choose what to dive into because there's so much potentiality and so many different flavors of life to tap into, like astrology, there's health coaching, there's selling cars,
Mm-hmm.
There's other different things, and but it's a good problem to have. It's like, I have infinite ice cream flavors to pick from, and life is the ultimate sandbox, ice cream store. So
yeah, it is.
I like it a lot. I like seeing you glow talking about this stuff because it inspires me to keep digging into my particular passions, and it makes me want to look into this more.
Yep.
So yeah, it's contagious how you talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Passion is contagious.
Yeah. No
Both
matter
ways.
what
Totally.
just seeing somebody fired up about something,
Yes.
or just clearly interested.
Yeah.
It makes me interested.
So speaking of which, it's like give you some passion fire there. Like what's like give us a universal health tip.
Yeah.
That anybody can kind of start with.
Oh, go to bed and wake up at the same time every day.
Boom.
Yeah.
The circadian rhythm there.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God, absolutely. If you're going to bed at midnight and then 11 and then 10 and then 1 and then you're not waking up at the same time every day, there's a very deep psychological kind of lack of a psychological stability that comes from not having, honestly, consistency just always is the best.
The body especially.
Yeah.
Just like the physical body.
Body's so habitual. So if it's like, not used to when it goes to bed, when it wakes up at 9 and then wakes up at 6 and then wakes up at 7 and wakes up it's not going to really it's not going to have enough time to it's not going to have enough overlap of experience to really get into to trust itself, really.
Yeah.
And that lack of self-trust of when am I going to wake up, when am I going to go to bed, has a physiological effect on the body and on the mind. So waking up and going to bed at the same time every day, and, one doesn't have to be extremely rigid about it, but, if they go to bed 10 and then 10:15, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
But, like, just having a rough outline, I think has really helped my clients and helped me have a
That's
mental.
interesting.
Yeah, it's helped me tackle the day as well, because I feel grounded and more motivated. I don't feel like a leaf in the wind when I don't know when I'm going to wake up, or when I do know when I'm going to wake up, because I feel like I feel more confident and I feel grounded and structured. And my anxiety and depression, if I'm feeling anxious or depressed, it really helps just kind of have those feelings go away.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, you feel more rooted.
Yeah.
I associate like the body and physical things, or if we talk about the chakra system, which I like kind of interfacing with astrological symbolism.
Yeah.
I think of like the root chakra.
Yep.
And when I think of that, I think of the moon.
Yeah.
And like just nourishment, like the moon is the mother. And I have like my moon is in Taurus. Again, it's my chart again. And Taurus is like this grounded earth sign that can be kind of stubborn.
Yeah.
And like my moon is there. So it's like I do very well with routine, physically speaking, and just like I need that.
Yeah.
If I don't do that, physically it doesn't.
That's the perfect word for it, is routine.
Well. Yeah.
Just having that consistency.
Rooted routine.
I love that. There's so many. I love like symbolism in that way. There's so many words that are just like come from.
What are the origins?
Yeah, I love that stuff because it makes me just feel more connected to my grammar and how I speak. But I love that. Just getting into routine and working on our health, and we all know, most of us know what we need to do too. This is another health thing that's fascinating. Most of us know what's best for us, but the problem is getting there, and the problem is having it stick on the wall.
And whether you believe you're worth it.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Like these inner
feelings
these
of
inner
lack.
Beliefs that are often not even aware of.
Yes, that's true.
It's
the
like,
root is...
Or you want to tackle your weight loss, your health goals, whatever it may be. It's like, do you really believe you're worth it? Do you really care enough about yourself to stick with it?
And how does one go about achieving those goals? Usually what people instinctively go to is what is secondary, which is what we eat and what we drink, and all that stuff's really important. But to me, it's technically secondary to love, And if and when we ground ourselves and practice self-love and self-acceptance, that's when we really kind of go to the moon. It's like, that my diet is now sticking more than ever because I love myself no matter what I'm eating. It's weird. It's paradoxically true.
What do you think about this? I don't know. It's kind of a binary way of looking at it. Into this approach of fake it till you make it.
Yeah,
where you're doing
that's
these
a great
like
topic.
kind of you're like forcing your, I don't want to say forcing yourself, but you're like, I'm going to smile and then I'm going to be happy.
I don't like the slogan at all.
I know something about it rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, because I know what they mean though.
Yeah.
The faking it till you make it is really interesting because
might be like a nudge in the right direction.
I think a better way to go about it is just to tell the people to have courage, right? It's just like what the pros of fake it till you make it is it gets you to do something you don't want to do or you have resistance to doing that thing.
Yeah.
The reason why I don't like the fake it till you make it slogan is because it insinuates that you have to be inauthentic.
Yes. Yeah. It's like actually be the person you want to, like, love yourself.
Yeah.
And
if you're doing something new, it doesn't mean that you're faking anything. You're just trying something new. You're just doing your best at something new.
Yeah.
Which requires courage. So I think that the better way to say it is, have courage till you make it. And it's less off the tongue.
It's like growth is not going. Don't expect growth.
Yeah.
To be a pleasantly feeling experience.
Yeah,
not going to be a comfortable experience.
Yeah, or a feeling of needing to be inauthentic, like a fake side.
Yeah, you need to be somebody else.
No, you just be yourself.
Yeah,
but just push your edge and do the things.
And again, bringing it back to the astrology, we all have limitless ways of expressing ourselves.
We do.
We have different parts of who we are.
Yeah.
Like, if you're depressed right now, it doesn't mean that's who you are.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you can't be joyful.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But making that change of expression is going to be a process.
And that's the thing, is like, if somebody wants to get good at basketball, they need to play a fuck ton of basketball. Yeah. If somebody wants to get good at, attracting whoever they want to attract romantically, they need to approach, whether men or women, they just need to approach them 50 million times. Yeah. And then they'll get good at it.
But that 50 million starts the first step.
Exactly.
And the first step, and maybe, like, how do you make that first step?
Yeah.
I don't know, working with clients, is there a way, like, that first step?
Oh, yeah.
How do you get that? How do you break it down?
Yeah. Yeah, trying to acquire a client or trying to actually, or working with them once they're already.
You want to make some dietary changes. You want to lose some pounds.
Again, man, I'm a broken record here, but unconditional love, man, it's the only way. It's the only way to have things stick. Is I try to get them to really realize that they, first off, are worthy and deserving, and secondly, that if they don't start chipping away, this is the thing, I don't ask my clients to be the Buddha and love themselves overnight or anything, but it's the act of chipping away at that that really motivates the body, mind, and spirit.
Setting a course.
Having a North Star. We could be, somebody could be 500 pounds and really struggling. But then if they have the North Star of I'm going to chip away at this every day. It's like, that's what the self-love is. If somebody's really lacking self-love and they have this one thing they do every day, if they look at themselves in the mirror and they remind themselves that they're worthy, and then the rest of the day they don't like themselves, but if they like themselves in that moment, it's a little bit more than the day before, and then that motivation snowballs and it just keeps going if you just stick with it and have somebody in your corner, like a health coach or a parent or whatever, to keep you on track. But it's tough. I talk about it and it's easy to make it seem like I'm making it sound easy. It's not easy, but because there's so much, the one person, somebody has to get to the root of why they don't feel loved. Whether usually it's parental stuff is just,
we don't want to blame parents. These are conditions that make us who we are.
Exactly.
Right?
No, yeah, but we need to recognize neurosis, though.
Sure.
We need to recognize
have some clarity there.
Yeah, it's like, my girlfriend, I appreciate how her and I talk about just her particular experiences with some of her friends recently she's talking a friend through some tough times with her particular parents she's had, and she's saying how there are moments in our childhood that stick with us for the rest of our lives, and our parents a lot of time don't even know that they're doing this to us. Or
Yeah,
that
we're just like sponges
we're
at a
just
young
sponging.
age, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we need to be able to recognize something that has had planted seeds of pain and sadness and anger, and we need to recognize where they come from and why we feel how we feel, and
feel what we feel.
And feel what
Actually
we feel.
feel it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky part, because especially for men,
Yeah.
because we, when it comes to crying, when it comes to, the more the better, really, when it comes to crying. It's like, my God.
Totally relate to that.
Yeah. And
I'm a very stoic Capricorn, so that's
it's hard to cry as a man in
absolutely.
particular. I mean, as women, obviously, plenty of women have a hard time crying too, but especially with men, there's a lot of societal pressures to, not cry. Like it's weak or whatever, and it's just bullshit. It's like this idea that not feeling how you're feeling, but then when you don't feel how you feel, you become a very neurotic man. You become a very suppressed and passive aggressive,
solidified emotions.
Solidified, exactly. And then we become familiar with not feeling our emotions, and then
you can't feel other people.
Yeah, exactly.
And your relationships
it keeps us
suffer.
Closed off. From others.
Yeah.
So I think there's a big with trauma. I think there's big parental. This is a kind of a consistent psychological theme: is we either become our mothers or fathers, or we become the opposite. We either like, I want to do never whatever or whoever like aspect of our parents we don't like growing up. We're like, I want to be the opposite. I want to go against the grain, or we become exactly like our parents. Maybe the mold that they placed upon us.
Sure.
So it's tricky breaking, because our parents are our first experience of love, which is, or hopefully, and then then it's tricky because it's also our first experience of lack of love in a lot of ways, because our parents are as human as all of us.
So there are different modalities that you can introduce to clients in that way to address these things that are ingrained in early childhood.
Yeah.
Psychotherapy.
Yep.
Talk therapy. You can mentally kind of start getting a grasp.
Yeah.
Now I've found that there's that can be very clarifying. And then I already mentioned this book I'm reading right now, Body Keeps the Score, is about this the way these emotions and things that are ingrained in us become very physically part of our bodies.
Yeah.
In ways to actually feel these things.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be controlled by these emotions if they're still physically there and unfelt. There are all sorts of, whether it's yoga,
to release.
different modalities that you can introduce and use that can be incredibly helpful. And I can say from personal experience working on these things that are still always in progress. It's never ending, right? Self-work.
Yeah.
Now, another thing you brought up as far as when you have a client and you're addressing the whole person.
Yeah.
Psychological, and before you even get into the physical body, you start there, because it's no use if that's not in alignment.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned like the role of environment, getting somebody to take the first step. Yeah. Like their environment is very important, right?
Absolutely.
Like if you can set all the intentions you want, but if you're in this place of everything around you is pulling you in a different direction.
Yeah, you need to set yourself up for success. As a client. You need to, I go grocery shopping with my clients. This is the funny thing is I'll go to the grocery store with them just to motivate them to pick out the right stuff. I've done that with a handful of clients, and I like it because it's very personal.
That's awesome.
I really like connecting with them that way, and then I go to their house, do the house calls, and what I do is
does your doctor go grocery shopping with you? You need to check this guy out here. Alex Chambers, what's the site?
Oh yeah, it's chamberswellness.com. And you can check me out, and if you know anyone who's interested, we can book a in-person or a Zoom consultation. But it's it's fun. It's fun to do, and it's fun to get that hands-on, because it's like, you get to meet face-to-face, you get to go to the grocery store, you get to pick out the fruits and vegetables and different things, and they get to be like, is this good for me, or is this, and I like that, and that points to the house calls too, because I've been doing nothing but house calls for months now, and it's it's better than
Yeah.
in office.
You got to actually connect with the whole person.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, and you're in their nest.
Yeah.
So they're extra comfortable. And I like that because they're able to relax and open up and be vulnerable. And I've done a handful of Zoom client meetings as well. And I had a Zoom client meeting that was the best meeting I've ever had. One of the best meetings I've ever had. It was just fully emotional, and she was digging into a lot of her processes and traumas and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful.
Opening up.
And it was like,
that's courage.
She was so, like you just encouraged, she's so courageous in that way. And it just opened me up, even more, and helped me hold space with that context of somebody who's really talking about their parents and talking about the trauma and talking about all this stuff. So I like how that flow can occur. Sometimes my client meetings are practical, and we dive into the physiological protocols, because my client might be more of a kind of a practical thinker, and that motivates them heavily.
Yeah.
Or they might be more of an emotional, and I dive into the philosophical as the foundation. But sometimes I lean more into that more than other times, due to kind of getting the read on my client and feeling into what they might receive the easiest.
Well, I think you just have a natural aptitude to making people comfortable, to open up, and
thank you.
That's a real gift that you clearly have.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Ever since I was little, I try to make people feel comfortable so they can
to be vulnerable. And like, man, that's one of, even as like a songwriter and every aspect of my life, like when that concept first, probably, in my mid-20s, I think, doing some self-work, doing some therapy, that idea that, wait a minute, like vulnerability is power.
Yeah, it is.
It's like
it's
not weakness.
Man. That's another perfect
And the more
example.
I lean into that, it's like, I think the better my songwriting gets, the better my connections get.
It's
that
true.
alone, that
it's true, because you inspire others.
Yeah.
I'm a firsthand experience.
Yeah.
Of
this podcast, trying to be open and vulnerable, and
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a challenge.
Yeah, and ever since our first call, man, I felt inspired by you, because it's just like the way you go about your life with the music and stuff is really contagious, and it makes me want to wake up even earlier and go after my things, because it's like, it's hard to explain. It's just after speaking with you on one of our calls or whatever it may be, it just, you feel, when you speak with somebody who you feel lifts you up, you just feel like you can face hard things easier.
Yeah.
And it's like, somebody.
You got someone in your corner.
Yeah.
Wanting the best for you, and you want the best for each other.
It's just
so valuable.
It's like, there's this, I don't have to believe the lie that I'm alone or whatever.
Yeah.
Easier to throw that belief in the trash.
Yeah, that's where it belongs.
So then some days I'm like rummaging through the trash and getting that belief if I'm feeling crappy one day.
You got to feel everything. You don't want to like.
Yeah. So.
Man, how long have we been going? Should we check?
I don't know.
Is this still recording?
I don't even know what time it is. Oh my God, it's 8:06. Damn.
I mean,
that's fast.
Time flies.
That's true. That's true.
I mean,
why is that true? Time flies when you're enjoying. That's a whole.
When you're in the flow. When you're in the flow, you're one with the ocean.
Yeah.
There is no time. There is no separation.
Yeah, that's just it. That's the perfect answer.
Yeah.
Because it's true, or feels like it feels the truest. Because time is illusion, but the illusion feels most real when you're suffering.
Yeah.
So, but when you're not suffering and you let go and you surrender.
Yeah, it feels like it's going to be forever sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. A day could feel like a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Damn, well,
it always goes by.
Yeah.
It does go by.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't.
At the same time.
In a good way.
Yeah.
Right? Are we helping? I don't know. I mean,
I forgot to ask you what you wanted these episode lengths to be. I should have asked that before.
We're like an hour and a half.
Oh my God! And
now, I think that's
crazy.
I think that's actually probably a solid.
I think that's.
I mean, if you've listened this long, that's greatly appreciated.
Yeah,
thank you for connecting with us.
Yeah.
But I also think, even like when I'm listening to something for longer than that, even if I like it,
Oh yeah,
it might be like a good
break. like
a good first of many like episodes, because I see many between us.
Okay, well, I'll be back, you guys, and Evan, I really appreciate you having me on, and
thank you.
Been fun. It's been fun, and just having you here, going on our walks, and then having be that pre-podcast conversations.
Well, I'm honored to have you as my first guest, and thank you for being our first stand-in eternal human. So
amen. And
right.
thank you for coming this way. And Evan, cheers to more episodes and to 1 million subscribers.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Till next time.